For those curious people, this is Talkaoke, pop-up talk show. Do come and have a seat on the table. At the moment, we're talking about farting dinosaurs, but I'm just trying to explain why and how we got there. And I don't mean evolutionary, I just mean within this conversation. Hello, welcome to the second of our edition of Talkaoke Shorts, where we give you a more digestible version of a Talkaoke conversation where we've edited it down. This one took place in the Natural History Museum as part of their late session. And this is really interesting because we started off with some really fun topics and then moved on to some much deeper stuff later on. And you can really hear the transition. If you don't know what Talkaoke is, and have not heard of it before, it's a pop-up talk show that's been gaining popularity in festivals, clubs, galleries, theatres, conferences, on the street, in parks, everywhere.
It consists of an illuminated round table which looks a little bit like a spaceship, with a host sitting in the middle of it on a swivel chair. Participants sit around the outside and the microphones passed around, and you can speak about whatever comes to your mind. The conversations can last a couple of hours, but this is just a podcast where we edit out the recordings into bite-sized pieces so you can listen to the highlights from our exciting talk show wherever you are and whenever you want to.
Okay, my name's Mikey. Let's find out who we've got around the table. What's your name?
I'm Asher.
Asher, welcome. And
Christian.
And
Timna. And Margot.
And obviously it's early days, we're just starting, but I feel we need to warm this up so when the big crowd comes through, we've got the flow going. So has anyone got any thoughts, comments, suggestions, ideas, observations, interjections, suppositions?
I think it's really special to walk through the whole museum without any other one.
Okay. Has anyone else done that?
Yeah. I was working here during COVID, and so I was coming in once a week when it was completely empty. And during the summer, it was gorgeous. Yeah. You could walk around the whole museum, it'll be pitch silent. And when you're in the main hall, you can hear your footsteps reverberate around the entire Hindsey Hall, and it's great.
Asher, have you ever been to the museum on your own?
I've been maybe like once or twice because I don't live in London. It's my first time coming for like a night event and seeing it so empty, as you said, is actually quite beautiful. But I don't think there's really one size fits all. There needs to be these almost like individualized portions of the museum. But running events like this is a really good way of doing it.
I mean, could you individualise the museum? Earlier on we were at the Festival of Genomics and we were talking about individualised tailored medicine. Could you have an individualised tailored museum experience? And what would that be?
We already have individual, what's the word that you use? Personalised experiences in the museum. Yeah. I think there's an event that goes on, I think, once a month that happens before the museum actually opens, and they just get kids that have learning disabilities to come in, and so they have a more quiet space with educators around to actually bring them through in a more conducive environment.
Any other ways to sort of personalise the experience, or is it already personal, the experience of the museum?
I think it's kind of personal because, we are all unique, so I think we all have different thoughts in our heads, so I think it's kind of already the personal experience. What I thought when we were speaking about the personalized museum, I think the kind of specialness of the moment having this museum. So I think it gets special because normally I really like this place, but it felt so special without other people. But I think just knowing that normally there are a lot of people here made it that kind of special. And I think if I would know that no one else never would be here, I wouldn't think it would be that special. And I think it would be kind of also weird to me because I wouldn't like to be in such a huge building by myself. I think it would give me goosebumps.
Is there a point here from you, Laura?
Yeah, actually, also I think it's quite incredible that this event is free because I don't know if the Natural History Museum still does it, but they did like a sleepover in the museum, and that was like over £100 for the experience, which I think good for the museum, and I agree with that, but also it kind of, just by the idea that probably the people who would want to go and do it, that would be mainly tourists, kind of puts me off. Yeah. And this is more kind of, I haven't seen any proper advertising for it, so I feel like it's only people who have the secret knowledge about this event. Yeah. So it feels special.
Okay, so in a way, this is a secret event. Hopefully it's not too secret. So we're talking about what it's like to be in the museum at night, but then it moved on to this idea of a personalised museum experience. Can you personalise it? Can you make it your own thing? Timna said, it's always personal because my head is different from your head. Margot?
I can't remember who mentioned about the young children who come in and have the sessions here when it's a little quieter. I do have a feeling, though, that our how we receive what's on display in the museum is affected by the people around us. And I think what you said about the events, which are quite expensive to come and, do in the museum, I think that really almost selects people who are around each other. And I think that just creates a different kind of dynamic. If you open that event, that sleepover for £100 a ticket, if you open it up to general public or allocated half of the tickets for free, you may get a different experience. But maybe we don't want that. Maybe we don't want the full experience. Maybe we want an exclusive experience of people who are like us, look like us, and experience art in the same nice way. They're not going to touch the artworks, which obviously is going to stress you out, the security people, but,
for those people that are concerned with the security, have you done a sleepover? Is it a bit of a difficult one to kind of watch over?
No, that was quite easy, I will say.
Yeah?
The people, they just enjoy themselves, explore themselves. They're not into making problem. Yeah, so most of the people, they just come to enjoy and experience these things. And it is hardly we have any issues.
Did people have any nightmares or bad dreams?
No, I don't remember. I had only one of these. But the only thing that was for the kids. So to keep an eye, if they are safe, they are not running around, damaging, they can do anything.
But they were quite well behaved by the sounds of it.
But when they're together, so you don't know when they gang up.
It can be big, Yes, okay. Laura?
I actually have questions, sorry, because I find it really fascinating. The only place I slept overnight as a kid was a kindergarten.
We want a final thought from Liz before you go. This is the order of the day for the whole rest of the evening. Anyone leaves, we want a final thought from them.
I really like eating staff canteen food. Yeah. Because sometimes you need the carbs, the double carbs when you're really hungry.
Carb heavy.
Yeah, like yesterday they had pasta and chips.
Yeah. Well, like a chip-based pasta or a pasta-based chip?
Both.
Yeah.
Just both. And you can even get sides that are also carbs. So you can also get rice, you know what I mean? It doesn't stick to any kind of identity. It isn't Italian, it isn't French. It's just
kind
a
of
mixture.
Cosmopolitan,
maybe that's a reflection of the museum and who we are as people.
Okay, well that's an interesting thing to throw in. You were asking your question, weren't you, Laura?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
In terms of the sleepovers, either for kids or adults, is it like a kind of a curfew hour when you say okay, so now everyone actually goes to sleep, or can people just, if they want to sleep, they sleep, but if they want to wander, they wander, or is there
is there
lights
a curfew?
off?
Is there lights off? Is there?
You have to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And then,
or is there an all-night party going on?
Yeah, exactly. Well, how does it work? And are people snoring?
How does it work? Is there lights out? Is there a curfew? Can you just wander around the museum and do an all-night party?
And where do people sleep if they want to sleep?
Floor.
Where do they sleep? Okay, well, let's ask the experts. So answer some of these questions. Jasper?
No, I have to, because that was, I think, soon after COVID, back in 2021, I think. So that's true. People, they bring their own bags, they sleep. We turn off the light at a certain time.
Okay.
People do snore. Yes, they do.
Is it loads of snoring, or is it just one or two snores?
When it's 100 or 200 people in one gallery,
there's going to be a lot.
There is a next one, and there is a next one.
It's almost like a choir of snoring.
Actually, I remember we had one problem.
Yeah.
There were some guys outside. They had sports car, and they were revving and making all this noise.
Right.
And all the guests, they were just so annoyed. They could not sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, when you do a sleepover with a bunch of strangers, it's not the snoring you have to worry about, it's the farting through sleep.
But that's the good thing about sleepover, this experience. So if we want to enjoy this nice, comfortable sleep, we can sleep at home. We should, or anybody who is coming to sleep, or strange people with a strange place, he should expect something which is not normal or they're not used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be like the best night's sleep ever, is it?
So even if someone is fighting and all that kind of noise, that's what makes it memorable.
It's very natural as well, isn't it? And we're in the Natural History Museum, so it sort of makes sense.
That's the point.
Yeah.
I've worked on one of them. They're pretty wild, actually. So the idea with the sleepover is that kids come, and they pay a fair bit of money to come and sleep over with their parents in the main hall under the big whale. And they do a bunch of activities in the night, and then they just sleep under the whale, and then they wake up in the morning and
they
go
have
home.
a whale of a time.
That's the one.
And then what do they do during the night? Because you said they do activities.
Yeah, I mean, one of the activities that I work on is, you know, the dinosaur exhibit. Yeah. They cut all the lights off, so it's pitch black. And they put out these, like, you know, it's like this little jigsaw where you've got to find all these bits of the dinosaur to find out the name of the dinosaur. But it's pretty wild, it's pretty crazy, because you get all these kids running around in the pitch black, screaming different little bits of dinosaurs, and their parents are trying to run after them to help them out.
It sounds like a total nightmare to me.
But they have so that's the kids' night. That's the kids' night, but they have an adult version, which is obviously quite different.
Yeah. Is it still about finding bits of dinosaur, or is it different?
I don't know. I think it's a bit more grown up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Did dinosaurs fart? Do we know that?
That's what finished them off.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
It's climate change.
It wasn't.
They blew themselves away.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all that methane.
I'm blown away by that idea. For those curious people, this is Talkaoke Pop-Up Talk Show. Do come and have a seat on the table. At the moment, we're talking about farting dinosaurs, but I'm just trying to explain why and how we got there. And I don't mean evolutionary. I just mean within this conversation.
I wonder if, like, because people are so fascinated by dinosaurs, obviously they are no longer about, just in case anyone wondered. But I wonder if they were around now, would we be farming them? Would there be like a methane problem with dinosaurs because we'll be just like, you know,
would they be, instead of domesticating cows, would we domesticate the Diplodocus? I heard somebody in the museum call it yesterday, I call it a Diplodocus, but they said Diplodocus. Joanna?
I've heard that dinosaurs come from chicken, so maybe if they would taste like chicken, probably the chicken farming industry would be on it.
Okay, so it would be like I mean, imagine Kentucky Fried Dinosaur.
Exactly,
thank you. It would be huge. It would be bigger than the bargain bucket that you get now. A Diplodocus dipper, would it work? Could we farm dinosaurs even now in a kind of Jurassic Park type scenario? Would people eat? Let's have a show of hands. Would you eat? Who eats chicken? First of all, maybe we'll just start with that. Some chicken eaters. Would you eat dinosaur? Yeah, you would. No, you say no. Why, Louise?
No, it just doesn't seem appealing. I like to stick to what I know.
Okay, what is that? Chicken?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a bit of lamb if I'm feeling really frisky.
But Lucia, you would eat dinosaur.
I mean, we have chicken nuggets that are in the shape of dinosaurs already, so it's just going one
so
step.
In a way, it's almost like a harbinger of what's to come, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, is it possible? It sort of makes sense if you're going to go for livestock farming to think bigger.
I just want to say, because somebody mentioned about the NHM canteen, and maybe that's some kind of like a market niche that they could explore, just like really kind of go big on fake dinosaur meat. You know, people come here for obviously the exhibitions and learning, but they should be coming. This should be like a food destination. Like, what's wrong with that?
Is it the missing link in terms of the canteen, the dinosaur snacks?
I don't have an answer to that, but I was thinking about like how the skin of a dinosaur would taste, or would it be like chewable? I don't know, because for me, like I always have the impression that the skin of a dinosaur must be super thick, but I have no clue.
I don't know. We'll ask our dinosaur expert.
I think if you are going to fry a dinosaur, you would need a really big frying thing.
Yeah. Okay, I think
so. Are we shopping the dinosaurs before frying them, or if frying them whole?
Okay,
that's the question.
I mean,
deep fried. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
deep fried.
Okay, all right. There's a point over here.
I feel like you'd fry it skin down, like a fish with lots of butter, and it would be like really crispy.
Okay, butter. You need quite a lot of butter.
Like lots of butter, lots of garlic, lots of rosemary.
We've got a new face at the table. Tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Christian.
Christian, at the moment we're talking, would you eat a dinosaur, just to begin with?
What, would you eat a dinosaur?
No, would you eat a dinosaur?
Yes.
Yes.
You eat birds, and birds are dinosaurs.
Okay, so
yes.
how would you cook it? Similar to a chicken?
And it depends on what you have in your fridge and what carbohydrates you're pairing it with.
Would you eat a dinosaur? Tell us your name as well again.
Asher, obviously Aurelia, and I would not eat a dinosaur.
Why?
Vegetarian.
You're a vegetarian?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to give you a... No, I mean... and we've got a new face over here. Tell us your name.
Josh.
Josh, would you eat a dinosaur?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any particular species?
Probably like all of them.
All of them, okay.
I think most people won't, because I know I come from Sudan and they eat camel, and they had to kind of coerce me into that. And I think there's some animals that people, or whale, would eat.
What was a camel like?
I don't remember. I just was really.
Were you traumatized by it?
Yeah, it really was. And my sister only reminded me of that like last week, and that's why it's at the top of my mind, because I think I forgot about it. So.
Okay, so it can be traumatic eating larger animals, such as the camel.
But I think it's similar for horse. I mean, I remember when I was a child, and my sister, I think, just to be horrible to me, said, she wasn't a horse, so it is not what she said. But
I've got these animal sounds mostly for the kids, but useful tonight.
Yeah, it's good tonight.
Yeah.
No, but she said to me like, "Oh, you know what this is made of?" And I said, "No, what?" And she said, "Oh, salami is made of horse meat," and that was just so. I don't know. It just didn't feel right because it's such a noble animal. But then, but again, like. Dinosaurs are quite noble animals, I would say, or were.
I mean,
it's a matter of perspective.
We are a kind of, we're very discriminating about which animals we like to eat, or we have got an affinity with. Like dinosaurs are big, but I don't see any insect skeletons in the museum.
Insects don't have skeletons.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
But okay, so. But there's no is there insect carcasses? Are there insects, exoskeletons?
So the Natural History Museum is, the way to think about it is it's less of a museum but more of a library. Yeah. And instead of having books, we have flesh. So this museum here holds about 4 billion objects. I work in the mammal section, and we have about 400,000 individual specimens. So these are 400,000 dead animals, and every single one of these specimens becomes a repository for knowledge as a specific species in a specific place in a specific time. And you can tell a lot of information about the genetics, what they've been eating, how time has changed, and how how the climate changing has impacted them, how people moving to areas have impacted them. So there's a lot of dead bodies here, but they're all for good purposes.
Okay, so it's actually full of corpses in the History Museum. But corpses of animals, are some animals more popular than others?
To eat or to research, or where are we going with this?
Any of those things?
I mean, of course, I think people
have a camel, by the way?
We have several camels, yes, I think so.
Yeah.
But I guess people have affinities with different animals. A lot of people are very interested in mammals because we're closely related to them. Some people like insects. I guess it's different strokes, different folks.
Yeah.
You like what you like.
Do you get along with the insect people, the people that...
I like the insect people. I actually wanted to be an insect biologist for most of my life. And then I met my current boss, which is a mammologist. And when I moved over to London, he basically said, no, you're going to come work for the mammals.
Yeah, so
and here I am.
In a way, you were poached from insects to mammals.
Yes, of course, yeah. But I think there's a general affinity of people that work in the museum like most of nature.
I'd like to ask you if, when you're working with mammals, if you see an insect flying, do you think, I wish I was working with insects right now?
Do you get
or do you really enjoy mammals now?
Do you get insect FOMO, basically, is the question.
Okay, so specifically when I work in the museum and I work with mammals, the only time I ever see an insect is when there's a pest insect inside the collection and it's eating the skins. And so I don't have a FOMO kind of fear with it. I have oh no, these things are eating all our specimens and we need to do a huge cleanup to get rid of them. So but at the same time, when I go overseas and do field trips and I see cool insects, I document them for what I can. Yeah. And you're able to work with entomologists later on to work on different parts of science.
What is the coolest insect you've seen?
I think my favorite is something called Atlas moth, and it's one of the largest moth species in the world. It's about this big, and
growing as well.
It's massive, and they don't have any mouths. So when, the juveniles have mouths when they're in the larval stage, but after they pupate and they become adults and they're flying around, they don't have mouths, because that adult form only exists for one purpose, which is reproduction.
Because it's a giant sex machine.
Okay, yeah.
It's a beautiful giant sex machine,
okay.
And it has this big fat thorax that has the store of fat that allows it to continue living as a sex machine, and eventually as it lives, this fat storage goes down and it hopefully propagates, and then it dies.
Okay, so if you're going to be a sex machine, you need a big store of fat, basically. Josh, have you got a point about this, a question?
Nothing to say about the sex machine, but I really enjoyed you giving like the appraisal of having this collection and what we can learn. I'm just interested, like, if you're aware of any critiques of having this kinds of collections, and like the flip side of what it means to be having four.
What would you say? What do you mean by the flip side?
I guess there's, I imagine that in the field, there's like reasons why it's really good to have lots of collections and to have museums and to have taxonomies and understand the natural world, but I imagine there must be some critiques of like this kind of work, this kind of framework, this kind of way of knowing the world and stuff like that. I'm curious.
Okay.
I think the largest critique that has come up in more recent years is the history of the museum, or the provenance of most of our collections, because as you understand, this museum was a colonial institution. And a lot of our initial collections were made by explorers that were going across the world, setting up colonies and pretty much killing whatever they saw and putting it in a museum over here. And these were largely cabinets of curiosities to begin with. They weren't actually used for large scientific purposes. But I think today, if you look at a lot of the collections that were made within these colonial areas or in developing countries, they don't have as many specimens or a good database of what they have within their countries. So the Natural History Museum becomes a repository for all this knowledge that comes from across the world. And we do collaborate heavily with scientists, and we make our data openly accessible. So I'm from Singapore, and Singapore is an old British colony. It's a Commonwealth country. And I grew up going to the Natural History Museum in Singapore, which was a sister institution to this museum. And now we have partnerships set up between the two museums so that Southeast Asian researchers can have access to all the data and the specimens within the collection over here, and we can tie science together across the world. So there are definitely darker histories within the museum, but I think if anything we can use those histories to make it better moving forward.
It's kind of got interesting here. I don't know, Josh, if you've got any sort of reply to that. I mean, what do you think about this question of, a product of colonialization that we're benefiting, but are we benefiting as the whole world, or are we?
Sounds like you have an opinion on it.
But I'm not allowed to give my opinion. I could jump out and let someone go in and then give my opinion. But have you got an opinion on it?
I think it's really interesting that Christian was saying, like, these institutions started as curiosity cabinets in a particular time in the 19th century, 18th century. They're intimately linked with colonialism, taxonomies, sometimes connected to eugenics. Like, they have very complicated histories. I think the way you round it off is interesting because it's almost like it's a closed book. I feel like actually right now loads of people have questions about cultural institutions. The Wellcome Collection is doing a big whole turn the mirror to face in. So now's a really good time to be like, what are we going to continue to do to address these questions? In what ways do we maybe prop up philosophies of science, kind of like the grandeur of the West in some way? Like, in what ways are we still doing that? In what ways are we reckoning with that in a continued way? I mean, I think it's fascinating. It's a great time to be able to doing things like this, opening up the museums, really
We're opening
cool.
up the museum, but is the book of colonialism actually closed? I see some shakes of the head. What do people think? Is that book still being written? Have we closed the book? Have we closed that chapter? What do people think?
Yeah, I think, speaking of a book, it would be interesting to see what is not written in the book. Because I think Christian was speaking about the library about the museum as a library, which is kind of an archive. And it's like people decided what will be represented in the museum. So I think it would be interesting to also question what is not represented.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so it's come from a certain perspective. So what are the things that are missing from that? And anyone want to throw something in?
I guess there's something to a philosophy that what's not said is also important, right? So I guess events like this are great to just like maybe give the microphone to someone and ask them, what do you think this museum should be?
Yeah. I mean, okay, well, I'm going to turn the mirror back on you. Joanna, what do you think that this museum should be?
Well, I think it should be a collaboration.
Yeah.
I think we need to start asking questions, not just in the museum, but in our life, as to like, I guess, who are we? What are we doing here? And just I started asking.
Definitely feeling that,
and just like, why? Just like, why are things the way they are, and what can we do to make them better?
I mean, could the Natural History Museum study colonialism itself, or is that up to other museums? Is there a colonialism museum? Yeah.
Every museum is a colonial museum at this point.
So could we turn the sort of microscope of study onto colonialism itself and its effects?
I think there are definitely studies that look at museum collections and the representation within a colonial aspect of where these specimens are coming from and who are they actually being used by. And we are following a trend of making the knowledge and the specimens and the data that we have from areas that were collected in the past more accessible to the researchers working there.
And what about this question from Timna? This is not just to you, but to anyone. What are we missing? Obviously, that's a particular perspective. What we're missing with that very kind of Western European perspective when they've gone to visit other countries? Do they miss things? Do they gather everything? Does that distort the collection?
I just have an opinion, but I find it really fascinating that there's a guy called Galton who used to do. I think he was a naturalist, scientist. He was part of developing the science of eugenics, for example. But we look back at science in 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and it made mistakes. It was not a complete idea of knowledge. But for some reason, I feel like we've closed the book. It's the end of questioning science. It's an unquestioning, rational science. The scientific method is closed book. It absolutely does what it's supposed to do. It's a kind of Promethean thinking, right? It's it's always going forward. It's always going to progress. And I wonder, how these institutions prop up that philosophy of science and how that props up climate change or the inability to tackle climate change. That kind of Promethean thinking. We're always going to have a scientific avenue out of this. Why is it a closed book? I'm just interested about that.
Are we as progressive as we think? Is it a closed book?
I think you made a very good point. I mean, you look back at the Victorians and you realise just how wrong they were about some things. Yeah. But we don't apply that same thought to ourselves. How are we going to be wrong? You know?
It's easy to look back and realise that the Victorians were wrong, but what mistakes are we making? Where are the gaps in our thinking? In a way, it is a difficult question, because how do we know what our blind spots are when they're our blind spots? Where are we going to go with this conversation? We don't have to go so heavy. Maybe I feel like we've gone a little bit. We went from farting dinosaurs to rewriting, the history of colonialism. But we can do something in between. It's kind of up to you. Where do you want to take this conversation? Any thoughts about? Yeah.
I've got 2 points. One is, as we were talking about different ways of cooking dinosaurs, I'd quite like to see an NHM branded cookbook. Yeah. Cooking suggestions of all the extinct species. Just get famous or not so famous cooks on it, and just see what they come up with. But the second point was about what is the perspective that we're getting from museum being, I don't know, maybe arranged by the colonizers and that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm from Eastern Europe, and recently an AI has been asked, I think it was the image generating AI being asked to visualize, I think, Eastern Europe, and it was just so funny how it visualized Leonardo DiCaprio looking a little bit like Lenin with a goatee, and it's Kevin from Home Alone. He's kind of running through bleak streets with blocks of flats and that kind of stuff, and it is funny, and it's kind of oh look, this is kind of a vaguely famous person impersonating or kind of standing in for this generic Eastern European, but I think it really kind of distorts the truth, but kind of provokes the conversation. But I do think we have to keep on feeding voices so that image, that collection is different.
In a way, that's a sort of reflection of, whatever that kind of mainstream thought is, whatever the world kind of bubble, internet bubble thinks Eastern Europe is like. Well, there are tower blocks in Eastern Europe. And
Paris, even
true,
bigger ones,
true,
even bleaker ones.
So is it the same thing when it comes to lots of other cultures and spaces?
I kind of agree because, when it comes to, I'm from Sri Lanka, and a lot of the times there's stereotypes of how I should be, but it's completely wrong because if you come to Sri Lanka, we're not all like how they picture us to be.
How is it pictured? What is the sort of stereotype?
I don't know. When I go to museums and stuff and I see Sri Lanka, it's very much they show us as farmers and agriculture, but there was a lot more. There were royal families that ruled over land and stuff. And I think it's that kind of story because in the way it worked was Britain came over and then the way I looked at it is Britain came over, took a bunch of stuff, came back and then said the story that they want to say. Whereas the stories that actually happened aren't really spoken out too much. In Bollywood recently, there's been a lot of movies coming out where they're speaking on the vision of where it is from India or from Sri Lanka, how we viewed it. And I think that's where the difference comes in because sometimes I read books in British history and I'm like, that's not Sri Lanka.
So it's a really weird perspective of where you're actually from. Has anyone else got that kind of thing?
What's
your name again?
Helena, that's right. So it's fascinating, and I really like the idea that you were saying about stories and the stories that we're told. So my background's in eco-linguistics, which really looks at how language shapes our perception and interaction with the world. And there's this writer called E03 who basically says that stories are the secret reservoirs of our values. So if you want to change and bring about ecological, social justice or any form of change in the world, you change the stories by which people live. And when you do that, you fundamentally change their values.
Okay, so it's actually, we've got all these objects in the museum, and maybe this is an answer to the question that maybe it's the way we tell stories about those objects.
I think so, and it's the bigger story. It's not just the small stories, but the big stories about consumerism and, buy the big house, have the big car, buy more and more, and unbound economic growth. But when you think about the museum as well, for me, most museums kind of tell a story of what's extinct, what's dead, what's been taken, what's gone. And I think shifting that to kind of finding a balance about, yes, but what's living and what's here and how can we focus on regeneration? Because Mauritius has a similar story. When you think of it, it's coasts and blue seas and these amazing lands. But we gave the world the idiom as dead as a dodo. Because it was just a land of destruction, devastation. But that's not the story that's sold. The story is come, it's a rainbow nation. And I think also for museums, and maybe the Natural History Museum, it's finding that balance of, yes, there's all of this wealth of knowledge and wisdom, but how do we also include people and encourage people to shift towards harmony and growth and regeneration, building on these disasters of the past?
This was the People Speak Shorts podcast made by the People Speak. We would love to hear your thoughts about the subjects from the current episode and your feedback on your experience of listening to this episode. We're always looking for ways to improve and connect with people around the world, so make sure to get in touch and find our social media in the description of every episode below. If you would like to find out more about the future and past live events, please visit thepeoplespeak.org.uk/events. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep on talking and listening more.